Yo, what's up, you guys? Thank you guys for chilling with me on this chilling mojo where we are always turning an ordinary day into an extraordinary day. For what? I got two channels. If you are 420 friendly, I got me the second channel, Talking with Mojo, where we are talking every day over at the second channel. But today I want to talk about why did I end the podcast of Conversations with Mojo, dude. So if you don't know how to run a podcast, I'm gonna tell you how to run a podcast right now. If you want to run a podcast right, if you want to distribute a podcast right, you got to um, do a lot of research in the background and stuff like that, right? So I do work with AI. I do use AI as a tool, but I bounce ideas off of AI and off of you. So if you like an idea, I'll keep that and vice versa and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to it too, guys, I do a lot of research. I want to make a podcast episode professionally done. I'm talking about like background music. I'm talking about like few questions. I'm talking about like editing. I'm talking about like making this thing sound like really, really good. Like spending like days and making sure this thing sounds like really good. Like when I mean really good, I'm talking about like you have like a crew behind you that is doing this work and it's the work of one man. You know what I mean? So recently, well, the first guest, we were talking for like 2 hours, and then right after that, they scrapped the episode, and they were like, "Yeah, I don't want to do the episode," and it got into a huge thing after that. I'm not gonna get into detail. Then the second two or three, like I think it was like three other people that wanted to come on to the podcast. They were like, "Yo, we saw your thread on Discord, and we would love to go onto Discord. I mean, onto podcast." And I was like, "Dope, cool." Guys, you don't realize that, like, we sit at our computers all the time. So, for you to tell me that, like, hey, man, my life is busy, blah, 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 this and that, I get it, but you're not doing any editing, you're not doing anything, you're literally just reading over a bunch of questions and just talking to somebody online for, like, maybe an hour or not even that. Like, I try to bring it down to maybe 30 minutes, best case scenario, 15 minutes, like all that kind of stuff, right? So, like, I'm the one that's doing the work. I'm the one that's sitting down, figuring out the questions, figuring out the music. I'm the one that, in a click of a button, I can this to six different websites that play podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And you're the one that has to sit and just answer questions and just talk to somebody. We all watch YouTube, we all watch TikTok, we all look at the internet. So for somebody to tell me, hey, my life is too busy, I can't do it right now, I get it. But I'm the host, I'm the editor. Like, I'm taking as much time as I can out of my life to do this, and you can't sit down for like 25 minutes or so just to answer a couple questions about your life, or about your channel, or about what's going on and shit like that. Like, I really did want to make that whole entire podcast like blow up and have freaking people come on talk about their channels. I had 30 freaking topics, 30 topics to talk about on this podcast. And coming up with 30 topics is not easy, man. Coming up with 30 topics and then coming up with 30 questions about those topics, and then coming up with those questions that could kind of correlate with those topics so it could make a freaking decent podcast and it makes sense. Dude, that is not easy at all. And for people to just be like, hey, I want to come on the podcast, I can't wait, let's schedule a time. And I'm pretty much letting you, like, it's not like, okay, we're gonna do this 3 days. It's like, hey, dude, whenever you feel comfortable, whenever you have the time, let me know whenever you're free, and I'll let you know whenever I'm free. We can bounce ideas off of each other like that. And for you to come back at me and be like, hey, I'm gonna have to opt out, I can't do it, blah, 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 this and that, life happens, all this and that. Like, dude, after a while, like after the fourth guest, actually, I've had five guests that want to come on the podcast. The fifth guest is actually a musician and shit like that. And I think they had like their friend that wanted to come too. But after the fourth guest canceled on me, I literally reached out to them, was like, look, before you make any decision, you are seriously gonna have to think about coming on this podcast. Like, I'm not doing any research. I am not doing anything until you guys fucking commit to actually being on this podcast. Like, it comes down to a point where I give you a freaking like actual legal letter that says, "Hey, you're coming onto this podcast, blah 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 blah," all this kind of shit. Like, that's how professional I want this shit. And I even reached out to them and I was like, "Look, the podcast is on a hiatus. I took down all my videos. I took down everything." And I was like, "Look, if you want to come on the podcast, you guys better make sure that you want to. If you don't, I don't care. It's not a big deal." But after four guests freaking canceling on me, and one guest, like the first guest we got, it wasn't like we got into it, but it was like what got me about the first guest. There's a whole video, there's whole shorts about it. First thing, the one thing that got me about the first guest is that before my computer even finished rendering the whole thing, like it was like a 2 hour long interview. Before my computer even finished rendering the whole freaking interview, they already called me back and was like, "Hey, take it down," and this and that, and it got into a huge thing to the point where I had to actually think about making a legitimate legal letter and saying, "Hey, you're not gonna come back to 20, 30 minutes later and say take it down after we've been talking for 2 fucking hours." Like, that's like, that's kind of where I was like, "Yo, you guys don't realize how much effort, how much work people put into a podcast. It's not just sit down and record. It's a lot of fucking work." So, like, right now, I'm trying to run a second podcast where, like, it's like local and shit like that. I kind of let everybody know, like, yo, I just don't feel like doing shit right now. Because, like, I told them about the whole podcast with the whole gaming channel, and they were all, even the guy that wanted to talk about, like, homeless experience and shit, he was just like, yo, I'm sorry that happened to you. Like, that's a real bummer. That's a real letdown. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just not feeling it right now, Like, I'm gonna bring up the local podcast and shit like that, but as far as like the podcast that's on the gaming channel, I don't give a shit about that one anymore, man. I'm tired of fucking people coming on there and be like, "Yo, I come on there," and then like the last minute they fucking cancel, and I'm like, "Yo, I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking you for shit. I'm just asking to fucking ask you questions and have a conversation with you." So, yeah, that's the reason why the podcast is freaking like, it's just, it's died. It's like, I took down all the fucking videos. Like, I have a second freaking short that says, like, I've officially taken down all the videos, but as far as that, what do you think happens to somebody when you come onto their podcast and at the last second you're just like, you know what? I'm not gonna do this. I'm kind of looking at you like, then why the fuck did you freaking reach out to me and like, you're talking to me back and forth and you're like, yo, I want to come on a podcast. What's the questions? Like this and that. Like, like at this point, I kind of see it as a scam. I kind of see it as like, yo, you're like, yo, I want to be on a podcast. I'm like, yo, you have you checked out the channel? No. Then no. Then you're not gonna be on the podcast, and I'm not gonna spend the time and the fucking doing this shit. Because I think that's what people do. Is like that they don't know what the channel is about and shit. And they're like, yo, let me be on the podcast. And then they go to the channel and then they're like, oh, this dude is black. This dude is all about gaming and shit. I don't want to talk about gaming. I don't want to talk about that. And I'm like, do you realize I got like different playlists about different shit, right? So it's sad. It sucks. The whole podcast I was running and shit, it had over like 200 views and stuff like that. I felt good about it, but after a while, after the last guest, after the fourth one canceled, I literally reached out to him and I was like, I don't want to interview you or your friend. Like, this is a waste of my time. So. Guys, thank you guys for chilling me on this chilling mojo. I'm pretty sure if you really cared, you were like, yo, what happened to the podcast? You were so hype about it. You were so ready for this shit. You were ready to do the podcast. And now it's just turned into like, I don't want to do this podcast. I don't want to do this shit. I'd rather fucking do local podcasts and actually talk to people that really are like hype about talking to me about this instead of people that are like online that I can't even talk to that are like, yo, I want to do this shit, but then you come to me at the last second and then you're like, yo, I don't want to do this. It's like, yo, don't hit me up about a fucking podcast. Don't hit me up like that. So, yo, take it easy. There's more videos gonna be coming out. It's not about the podcast. Take it easy, guys.